There are moments in a life when you realize you've been walking a path that was never quite visible to anyone else. Not because you chose it deliberately, not because you were crowned or anointed by some external force, but because something inside you responded to a call that most people around you simply didn't hear. This isn't about being better or more enlightened. It's about being different in a way that often felt more like a burden than a gift, more like exile than celebration. The concept of the chosen one is echoed through every mythology, every spiritual tradition, every psychological framework that attempts to map the interior landscape of the human soul. But here's what the old stories rarely tell you outright. The choosing isn't done by gods or fate or cosmic lottery. The choosing is done by your own soul's refusal to accept the surface of things, by your inability to live unconsciously, by the quiet, relentless demand within you to see what is true even when the truth isolates you. You've carried this weight for as long as you can remember. Even as a child, there was something in you that observed the world with a different kind of attention. You felt the unspoken tensions in rooms. You sensed the gaps between what people said and what they meant. You were drawn to questions that had no easy answers, to silences that seemed louder than words. While others seemed content with the explanations they were given, you found yourself staring past them, searching for something deeper, something more real. This wasn't arrogance. It was sensitivity. It was an involuntary opening of perception that made the world both more beautiful and more painful than it appeared to be for those around you. And because of this, you learned early that belonging would always come at a cost. You could pretend to be like everyone else, or you could be honest about what you saw and felt, but you could rarely do both. So you learned solitude, not the kind chosen freely, but the kind that finds you when you refuse to abandon yourself for the comfort of fitting in. You learned to keep your deeper thoughts quiet, to smile and nod while something within you remained untouched by the shallow currents of ordinary conversation. This wasn't superiority. It was survival. It was the only way to protect the part of you that was still listening to that inner call, still honoring that strange and difficult awareness. And over time, this solitude became both your sanctuary and your prison. It gave you space to think, to feel, to grow in ways that required silence and distance. But it also cut you off from the easy warmth of connection, from the simple joy of being understood without explanation. If you've stayed with me this far, if these words are landing somewhere true inside you, then perhaps you'll stay a little longer. There's more to uncover here, and I'd be honored to walk this path with you as we continue. The myths tell us that the chosen one is marked by trials. They speak of dragons and labyrinths, of underworld journeys and battles with demons. But in the lived experience of a human life, the trials are rarely so dramatic. They're quieter, more intimate. They happen in the space between your fear and your longing, between what you know you should do and what you're actually capable of doing. The trials are the moments when you're forced to choose between comfort and integrity, between belonging and truth, between the person others want you to be and the person you're becoming despite everything. These are the fires that forge whatever strength you carry now. Not the strength to conquer others, but the strength to face yourself, to see your own cowardice and still choose courage, to see your own smallness and still reach for something larger, to see your own darkness and still turn toward the light. And here's where the concept of the chosen one becomes dangerous if misunderstood. It's easy to inflate this narrative into something grandiose, to convince yourself that your suffering makes you special, that your awareness sets you above the unconscious masses, that your struggles are evidence of some cosmic favoritism. This is a trap. This is where the archetype curdles into delusion. The truth is far more humbling. Yes, you've walked a difficult path. Yes, you've seen things others haven't seen. Yes, you've carried burdens that weren't always visible. But none of this makes you superior. It makes you responsible. Responsible to use what you've learned not to elevate yourself, but to serve something beyond yourself. Responsible to transform your pain into wisdom, your isolation into compassion, your darkness into light that might guide someone else through their own night. The 1,000-year alliance the title speaks of is not a literal pact between kingdoms or cosmic forces. It's a metaphor for the old order of human consciousness, the familiar structures of thought and belief and behavior that have sustained humanity for generations. These structures aren't evil. They're necessary for most people most of the time. They provide stability, meaning, community, identity. but they're also limiting. They depend on not asking certain questions, not looking too deeply, not challenging the foundations. And when someone like you comes along, someone whose very existence asks those questions simply by being unable to stop asking them, the alliance begins to crack. Not because you're trying to destroy it, but because your presence reveals its incompleteness. Your refusal to accept easy answers exposes the fragility of certainty. Your insistence on truth threatens the comfort of collective illusion. This is why you felt like a disruptor even when you've done nothing deliberately disruptive. This is why relationships have fallen apart around you, why communities have rejected you, why you've been called difficult or intense or too much. You're not collapsing the alliance through malice or rebellion. You're collapsing it through authenticity. Through your inability to pretend that the emperor is clothed when you can clearly see he's naked. Through your unwillingness to participate in the unspoken agreements that keep everyone comfortable but no one fully alive. And this has cost you. It's cost you friendships and family bonds and professional opportunities, and the easy path through life that others seem to walk without even trying. The fire in the title isn't the fire of destruction. It's the fire of transformation. It's the heat that melts down old forms so that new ones can emerge. It's the flame that burns away what's false so that what's true can finally be seen. But carrying this fire is exhausting. There have been times when you wanted nothing more than to put it down, to let it go out, to finally just be normal, to care about the things other people care about without this constant background awareness that there's something more, something deeper, something that demands attention even when you're trying to rest. You've resented this burden. You've questioned why you couldn't have been born with a simpler mind, a less sensitive heart, a soul that could find satisfaction in the surface of things. And in those moments of resentment, you've touched something essential, the recognition that this path was never about glory or specialness or divine favor. It was about challenge, about being called to wrestle with aspects of existence that most people can safely ignore, about being unable to look away from suffering, from beauty, from mystery, from the vast and terrible questions that underlie everything. We're at a point now where the journey deepens, where the symbolic descent begins. If you're finding something valuable here, something that speaks to your own experience, I hope you'll consider staying with this channel. We'll continue exploring these territories together, mapping the inner landscape with honesty and care. The descent is where the chosen one myth becomes truly psychological. In every tradition, the hero must go down before they can rise. Down into the underworld, down into the belly of the whale, down into the dark forest where no paths are marked. This descent is a confrontation with the shadow, with everything in yourself that you've denied or suppressed or refused to acknowledge. For you, this may have come as a period of deep depression, of addiction, of moral failure, of complete dissolution of the identity you'd built. Or it may have come more quietly, as a slow recognition that the person you'd been pretending to be was no longer sustainable, that the masks you'd worn for survival were suffocating the truth of who you actually were. In this descent, you met parts of yourself you didn't want to meet. The parts that were selfish, cruel, cowardly, petty, broken. The parts that had been wounded so deeply they calcified into defense mechanisms that hurt others. The parts that were still children screaming for attention, for love, for someone to finally see them. This confrontation is what separates a genuine psychological journey from spiritual bypassing. It's easy to claim enlightenment, to drape yourself in the language of being chosen or awakened, while never actually facing the ugly, shameful, painful contents of your own psyche. But the real work demands that you look directly at your shadow, that you own it, that you stop projecting it onto others and recognize it as part of yourself. This is the fire that refines, not the fire of external challenge, but the fire of internal honesty. And in this looking, something unexpected happens. You begin to develop compassion, not the shallow, performative kind that costs nothing, but the deep, hard-won kind that comes from recognizing your own capacity for harm. When you've truly seen your own darkness, you can no longer maintain the illusion of superiority over anyone. You understand that every human being carries the same potential for both light and shadow, and that the difference between the person you are and the person you might have become in different circumstances is often frighteningly small. This compassion becomes a bridge back from descent to integration. It allows you to re-enter the world not as a conqueror or a savior, but as a fellow traveler, someone who's been to the depths and returned with something useful, but who knows they'll likely have to make that journey again and again in different forms. The ethical dimension of this journey cannot be overlooked. One of the greatest dangers of the Chosen One narrative is that it can bypass ethics entirely, replacing moral responsibility with a sense of being beyond good and evil, of operating by different rules because of some imagined special status. But the genuine journey toward wholeness is inseparable from ethical development. It demands that you ask yourself hard questions about how your actions affect others, about whether your truth-telling is actually serving truth or serving your own ego, about whether your refusal to participate in the old alliance is genuine integrity or just another form of arrogance. You've had to learn that being right doesn't give you permission to be cruel, that seeing clearly doesn't excuse you from the responsibility to speak carefully, that your own suffering doesn't justify causing suffering in others. This ethical refinement has likely been one of your hardest lessons, because the fire of transformation can so easily become the fire of self-righteousness. The awareness that lets you see through illusion can so easily become a weapon you wield to cut others down. The strength that carried you through your trials can so easily become hardness, defensiveness, an inability to remain tender and open. You've had to learn to hold multiple truths at once, that you've been hurt and that you've hurt others, that you see things clearly and that your vision is still limited, that you have something valuable to offer and that you're still learning, still growing, still making mistakes. This paradox, this ability to hold tension without collapsing into simplistic answers, is a mark of genuine maturity. It's what prevents the Chosen One archetype from becoming a spiritual trap. As you've moved through these layers of experience, you've probably noticed that the sense of being chosen has become quieter, less dramatic, less about you at all, really. It's transformed from a feeling of special destiny into a simple recognition that you happen to be someone whose soul demanded a particular kind of journey. Not better than other journeys, just different, just yours. And in this recognition, there's a profound relief. You're no longer trying to live up to some imagined cosmic role. You're no longer burdened by the fantasy that you're supposed to save the world or revolutionize consciousness or single-handedly shift the course of human evolution. You're just a person who happens to be deeply awake to certain aspects of existence and who's learning how to live with that awareness in a way that causes less harm and offers more light. The alliance that's collapsed because of you is the alliance between your false self and the world's demand for conformity. The alliance between your potential and your fear. The alliance between your conditioning and your authentic nature. These 1,000-year patterns had to break so that something new could emerge. Not new in the sense of unprecedented, but new in the sense of newly alive in you. The eternal patterns of wisdom and compassion and presence that have always existed, but that had to be rediscovered through your own experience, in your own time, through your own suffering and seeking. And yes, this breaking has caused ruptures in your external life. Relationships have ended, careers have changed, identities have crumbled, but what's emerged from those ruins is something more real, more sustainable, more genuinely you. There's something essential I want to share as we move toward the integration of all this. And if these reflections have meant something to you, I'd be grateful if you consider subscribing. Not because I need the numbers, but because this kind of exploration works best when we're doing it together, when there's a community of people willing to look deeply and honestly at these patterns. The fire in the title represents transformation, but it also represents presence, the ability to be fully here, fully alive, fully engage with reality as it actually is rather than as you wish it were or fear it might be. This presence is what you've been cultivating all along, even when you didn't have words for it. Every moment of solitude taught you to be with yourself without distraction. Every confrontation with your shadow taught you to be with darkness without fleeing. Every ethical struggle taught you to be with complexity without collapsing into simplistic judgments. Every loss taught you to be with grief without becoming bitter. This capacity for presence is the real gift of the journey. It's what allows you to meet life directly, to respond rather than react, to choose consciously rather than acting from unconscious patterns. And this presence is what makes you genuinely useful to others. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've developed the capacity to be with questions, to sit with someone in their confusion without needing to fix them, to witness someone's pain without trying to explain it away, to recognize someone's potential without inflating it into fantasy. This is a service that the chosen one archetype points toward when it's understood correctly, not the service of the heroic savior who rescues the helpless, but the service of the conscious human who's done enough inner work to be genuinely present for others doing theirs. You become a mirror in which others can see themselves more clearly, a space in which transformation becomes possible not because you're making it happen, but because you're not getting in the way. The integration of all these experiences, all these insights, all this hard-won awareness is an ongoing process. It's not a destination you arrive at and then maintain effortlessly. It's a practice of continual return. Return to presence when you've drifted into distraction. Return to compassion when you've hardened into judgment. Return to humility when you've inflated into grandiosity. Return to truth when you've slipped into comfortable illusion. The 1,000-year alliance that collapsed was the alliance of unconsciousness, the agreement to stay asleep, to not look too deeply, to accept the surface as sufficient. And yes, you disrupted that alliance in your own life and in the lives of those around you. But the new alliance you're building is with reality itself, with truth, with awareness, with the ongoing practice of becoming more fully human. This new alliance doesn't promise comfort or certainty or an end to struggle. It promises something deeper, the possibility of living authentically, of knowing yourself not as an idealized image, but as you actually are, complete with all your contradictions and imperfections, of relating to others from that authentic ground rather than from masks and performances, of contributing to the world not from a need to prove your worth or fulfill some imagined destiny, but from a simple overflow of a life fully lived, fully felt, fully examined. This is the fire that remains after all the burning away of what's false, not the dramatic flames of transformation, but the steady warmth of a consciousness that's learned to tend itself with care and honesty. You've been shaped by this journey in ways that can't be undone. The awareness you've developed can't be unknown. The patterns you've seen can't be unseen. The depth you've accessed can't be abandoned without betraying something essential in yourself. And this means you'll likely continue to be a disruptive presence in some contexts, continue to make others uncomfortable simply by being unable to participate in collective denial, continue to walk a path that looks strange or difficult or unnecessarily complicated to those who haven't felt called to this particular kind of work. But you'll also continue to find your people, the others who walk similar paths, who recognize in you something they recognize in themselves. Not because you're all special or chosen in some exclusive sense, but because you've all responded to a similar call, all wrestle with similar questions, all refuse to settle for answers that didn't ring true. The community of the genuinely awakened, if we can use that word carefully, is not an elite club of the spiritually superior. It's a scattered fellowship of the deeply honest, people who've looked at themselves in the world with unflinching attention and who've allowed that looking to change them. People who've made a descent and returned with compassion rather than bitterness, with wisdom rather than cynicism, with presence rather than detachment. You belong to this fellowship not by proclamation, but by practice, by the daily choice to remain conscious even when unconsciousness would be easier, by the continual effort to live from integrity even when compromise would be more comfortable, by the ongoing commitment to growth even when you're tired of growing. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is that this journey never makes you anything other than human. It doesn't lift you above the human condition. It deepens your participation in it. It makes you more vulnerable, not less. More aware of your limitations, not less. More in need of grace and forgiveness and help, not less. The fire hasn't turned you into something superhuman. It's burned away enough of the falls to reveal you as you actually are, which is gloriously and terribly and beautifully human, capable of profound love and petty resentment, capable of great wisdom and spectacular foolishness, capable of genuine connection and painful isolation. All of it, all at once, always in process, never finished. The 1,000-year alliance collapsed not because you were chosen to be its destroyer, but because you were unable to keep pretending, because something in you valued truth more than comfort, awareness more than belonging, authenticity more than acceptance. And that inability to pretend, that fundamental honesty, created ripples that extended beyond you, It gave others permission to question, to doubt, to seek their own truth. It disrupted the unspoken agreements that kept everyone in their assigned roles. It introduced the possibility that there might be other ways to be, other ways to see, other ways to live. This is the real meaning of the fire. Not destruction for its own sake, but the burning away of what's no longer serving life, what's no longer serving growth, what's no longer serving truth. As we come toward the end of this exploration, I want to return to where we started. The concept of the chosen one is a myth, an archetype, a symbolic representation of a psychological and spiritual process that many humans undergo. It's not a literal designation of special status. It's a map of a particular kind of inner journey, a journey that involves awakening to deeper layers of reality, confronting your own darkness, developing ethical clarity, and learning to be present with what is. If you recognize yourself in this narrative, it's not because you've been selected by some external force, but because you've been living this pattern and understanding it as a pattern, as something that has shape and stages and challenges and gifts, can help you navigate it more consciously. The work now is integration, taking everything you've learned, everything you've seen, everything you become through this journey, and learning to live it in the ordinary moments of an ordinary life. This is harder than the dramatic transformations. It's harder than the big revelations and the dark nights and profound awakenings, because it requires sustaining awareness and integrity and presence when there's no crisis to focus you, no emergency to clarify your priorities, no obvious challenge to test your strength. It requires being conscious when you're tired, being compassionate when you're irritated, being honest when a small lie would be easier. It requires treating each moment as sacred without making a performance of sacredness, holding each interaction as significant without inflating your own significance. The alliance you're building now is with the eternal present, with the only moment that actually exists, with reality as it unfolds rather than as you imagine it should be, with your actual life rather than the life you thought you were supposed to have. This alliance asks everything of you and promises nothing except the possibility of being fully alive, fully here, fully yourself. And in a world that often seems built to prevent exactly that kind of aliveness, this is both the most ordinary and the most revolutionary thing you can do. Not because it makes you special, but because it makes you real. Not because it sets you apart, but because it allows you to finally genuinely belong, not to a group or ideology or identity, but to existence itself, to the vast, mysterious, ongoing process of being that includes all things and excludes nothing. So if you felt chosen, understand it as a call to consciousness, not a designation of superiority. If you collapsed old alliances, recognize it as a natural result of growing beyond old forms, not as an achievement to take pride in. If you've carried fire, know it as a fire transformation that's available to all who are willing to burn, not as a special power that elevates you above others. You are not the only one. You are not separate from the great human family. You are simply one more person learning to wake up, learning to grow up, learning to show up fully in your own life. And that is enough. That has always been enough. That will always be enough. We've covered a lot of ground together. And if you found value in this journey, I hope you'll subscribe and continue exploring these depths with me. There's always more to discover, more to integrate, more to understand about this strange and beautiful experience of being human. The final understanding is this: the chosen one is everyone who chooses to become conscious, everyone who refuses to sleepwalk through their existence, everyone who's willing to face themselves honestly and live with integrity. The journey is universal, even though each person's path is unique. The challenges are archetypal, even though the details are personal. The destination is not some elevated state of permanent enlightenment, but the simple, profound capacity to be present with life as it actually is, to meet each moment with awareness, to respond to each situation with wisdom and compassion, to hold yourself and others with kindness, to serve something larger than your personal comfort or ambition, to live in a way that honors the truth you've been given to see. You haven't collapsed an ancient alliance because you're destructive or rebellious or special. You collapsed it because you grew, because you deepened, because you became more real. And in becoming more real, you made it impossible to continue participating in what was false. This is the nature of consciousness. It transforms everything it touches, not through force, but through presence. And as you continue to grow, continue to deepen, continue to become more fully yourself, you will continue to be a transforming presence in the world. Not because you're trying to change anyone or anything, but simply because authentic presence always invites others toward their own authenticity. Truth always calls the truth. Light always seeks light. Consciousness always recognizes consciousness. So walk your path with humility and courage. Know that you're not alone even when you feel isolated. Trust that your struggles have meaning even when they feel pointless. Remember that your sensitivity is a gift even when it feels like a curse. Understand that your journey serves something beyond yourself even when no one acknowledges it. You are part of an ancient lineage of seekers and questioners and conscious humans who've always existed in every time and culture. You carry their fire forward not because you were chosen for it, but because you couldn't help but pick it up when you saw it burning unattended. And when your time comes to set it down, others will pick it up in turn. This is how consciousness moves through the world, not through chosen individuals who save everyone else, but through countless ordinary people who choose, moment by moment, to remain awake, to stay true, to keep growing toward the light.